The Koran Dominion had a simple doctrine. In retreat, the slow are left behind, no exceptions.
Leave the wounded. Leave the orphans. Speed is our survival. Those are my orders. I said no exceptions. We cannot afford sentiment. Any officer who hesitates will share their fate.
Across the ruined city, the dying pleaded, the small cried out, but the ships rose regardless, indifferent as the doctrine itself. One of them was a tiny girl, not yet old enough to speak full sentences. She huddled in a pocket of rubble, gray fingers trembling, large eyes watching the sky empty of her people. The last Koran vessel vanished into the smoke layer. Silence returned to the ruins, except for her small whimper. She reached a hand upward, not understanding why no one came to pull her out. Her mother had been pulled away by a soldier hours before. The child did not know she was already alone forever. The sun rose blood orange over the shattered city, and she was still there, reaching. Human patrols were pulling back to forward bases. Sergeant Thomas Keene had volunteered for one last sweep. Then he heard it, a faint cry, wrong in the silence. He stopped, listening. It came again, barely a whisper, from under a collapsed overpass. He didn't radio it in. He knelt and began pulling concrete aside. The small sound of breathing steadying his hands, a small gray hand curled and uncurled in the dust. He worked faster. When he exposed her face, two enormous dark eyes locked onto his, and everything else vanished. He reached in, and without asking himself why, he lifted the small gray body free of the rubble. She didn't fight. She just stared up at him, tears cutting fresh tracks through the grime. He cradled her against his chest and started walking east, away from the human lines, without a word into his radio. The skull paint was streaked with sweat and dust, but his eyes had gone soft. He didn't look back at the empty sky. He navigated the leaning ruins, stepping over shattered stone. The child shivered against him, a constant tiny tremor. He ducked under a broken archway and knelt, setting her gently on a slab. She stared up silent. He checked her limbs. Nothing broken. A dark bruise spreading on one thin gray arm. She still didn't make a sound, just watched him with those huge, unblinking eyes. He stripped off his jacket, wrapped it around her twice. The olive cloth swallowed her small frame. His radio crackled. A voice cut through. "Sergeant Keene, we're pulling back. Do you copy?" Thomas didn't answer. He twisted the volume knob until the static died, then silenced the channel. He lifted her again, the jacket-bundled child a slight weight against his chest, and kept moving. Without a word to command, he walked eastward, leaving the battle and the human lines behind. Ahead lay no man's land. He had crossed a line no order could erase. Artillery rumbled far to the west, a constant low thunder. The child shivered against him, a tiny convulsion. He pulled her closer, pressing her head into the hollow of his neck. The skull paint cracked as his jaw tightened. Around a broken corner, a dead Koran soldier lay crumpled, one arm draped across a shattered rifle. The child saw it first. She whimpered, a soft, broken sound, and burrowed her face into his collar, small fists clenching. He turned sharply, angling his body to block the sight. One hand cradled the back of her head.
"It's okay, little one. I've got you."
She couldn't understand the words, but the low rumble of his voice steadied her. The shivering lessened. He found a corner of crumbled wall, sat with his back to it, and kept her wrapped against him. The morning was gray and still. She didn't cry out. She just stayed curled, eyes closing, breath evening out against his chest. When he finally stood, the dead soldier was behind them. He walked east into the silence and didn't look back. Night swallowed the ruins. He found a hollow shell of a building and broke dry boards, feeding a small flame. With the fire crackling, he pulled out a ration bar. She watched, not understanding.
"Food."
She didn't move, so he took a bite himself, then offered it to her again. She took a tiny bite, then another. The corner of his mouth lifted. He pointed to the bar again. "Food," he said softly. She watched his lips, then stared at the bar. something clicking behind her eyes. She fell asleep against his chest. He sat still, listening to the tiny rhythm of her breath, firelight flickering. At dawn, he stood, joints aching, and carried her across a dry riverbed, the bridge a skeleton of metal above them. He walked on, his mind heavy with questions he couldn't answer. He had no orders, no extraction, no future that made sense. Only the path ahead, and the small trusting breath against his neck. The ruins opened onto a wider road, the debris thinning. 3 armed figures emerged from the haze. Thomas halted, angling his body to hide the child, but a rifle barrel already pointed toward his chest.
Keen? That's you? Identify yourself. What's that in your arms?
A child. She was left behind in the rubble. I am bringing her out.
Left behind. She's Corin. You are AWOL. Where's your squad?
They pulled back hours ago. I stayed. She's my responsibility now.
She's not a stray dog, Sergeant. She's enemy intel. Hand her over for debrief.
Number. She's under my protection.
You are making a mistake. Command will hear about this, Keen.
Davis lowered her weapon. Thomas watched them retreat into the dust, then walked on, the child still against his chest. He was a fugitive now, and the line was crossed. There was no going back. Thomas cut into a narrow alley, clogged with rubble. The walls so close his shoulders scraped. He ducked under a fallen beam. The child wrapped in a sling from his jacket, her eyes following the shadows. The debris opened onto a crashed shuttle, its hull torn open. Emergency lights pulsing red. He stepped inside. The crew was dead, but on the console, a Corin data pad still glowed. He activated the pad, and a blue hologram bloomed. A Corin woman with soft eyes, speaking low, melodic words. The child stiffened in his arms. And then she cried out, a broken, desperate sound. She reached for the image with both hands, her small fingers grasping at light. The data pad displayed emergency files. The woman was Eris, and the child was her daughter, Kiara.
Kiara.
She turned to him, her eyes wide, tears streaking, and for the first time, she didn't look lost. He knelt and wiped her cheek, the radio on his vest, silent since he'd turned it down, crackled back to life. A pre-recorded message looped. On an open channel, Sergeant Thomas Keen, designation 724, is declared absent without leave. Contact with enemy non-combatants will be treated as potential treason. Report immediately. Thomas stopped walking. Kiara stirred but didn't wake. He stared at the speaker as if it had burned him.
They've branded me a traitor for picking up a child.
He ripped the radio from its clip, the cord snapping. One sharp motion, and it lay silent in the dust. He didn't pick it up. He adjusted Kiara's weight and turned northeast, away from every human position on his map. The road ahead was emptier now. No patrols, no checkpoints, only ruins and silence, and a long, uncertain horizon. Kiara's small hand gripped his collar again, her breath soft and steady. That was enough.
No going back, only forward.
He walked on into the gray afternoon, the only human who would ever hold her, and the only one now hunted for it. He wandered into a village silenced by war. Among the leaning houses, he rifled through cupboards for anything useful. In a corner, half buried under plaster, he found a small cloth doll, with one button eye missing. He brushed it clean, then knelt and placed it in her small gray hands. She stared at the doll, then back at him, and for the first time, a tiny smile broke through the grime.
Thomas. My name is Thomas.
She watched his lips, then, with effort, shaped a sound. Tom, as a quiet laugh escaped him, the first in days. The sound surprised them both, but as he looked at her, the weight returned. This fragile piece wouldn't last.
There's a place, a neutral zone, they say. Deserters, refugees, survivors, that's where we have to go.
He lifted her again, the doll tucked beside her. A destination formed in his mind, a rumor turned into a promise. At dusk, they reached a scarred refugee camp. Weary survivors of both species huddled around smoky fires, but no one looked up with kindness. Deep in the night, alarms shrieked. Koran raiders tore through the camp, plasma bolts lighting the tents like lanterns. A blast threw Thomas sideways. When he scrambled up, his arms were empty. The ground was a tangle of bodies and embers. He searched blind, throat raw from shouting her name. Then he saw a Koran soldier slumped against a crate, arms wrapped protectively around a small gray shape. The soldier's chest was torn open, his breathing wet. He lifted his head, revealing Kiara alive but terrified, and rasped a broken plea. She was my sister's child. I found her in the rubble. I was bringing her out, but I can't. The soldier's hand fell. Your people are better than ours. Please, take her. And then he was still. Thomas reached for Kiara. She buried her face in his neck, whimpering. He stood, the camp burning around them. One side had left a child by policy. The other kept her by reflex. The difference between those two instincts was the whole war. He walked through the edge of the flames, carrying not just a child, but a promise to a dead enemy who had begged him to be better than the war. The neutral zone was still a rumor. He would make it real. He walked through the night, the glare of the burning camp smeared across the horizon. By dawn, the land was nothing but cracked flats and wind. Kiara had stopped shivering by midday. That scared him more than any patrol. He scraped the last ration into paste and fed her from his palm. She ate slowly, eyes heavy.
Water. Water.
She tried to mirror the sound, her voice a small echo. He nodded, and something like pride lit her eyes. That evening, wrapped in his jacket, she drifted in and out of sleep. She reached up, eyes closed, and murmured, "Da." She stiffened, then corrected, "Tom as." Thomas didn't correct her.
She called me Da.
He settled the word into himself and walked on. The last of the rations gone. Far ahead, a smudge of green broke the gray. He didn't know if it was real. He walked anyway. The green smudge resolved into a hidden valley. Wooden walls and watchtowers rose from the rock, a settlement no map recorded. The gatekeeper, an old rebel, studied Thomas's battered armor. Then Kiara's face. Without a word, he let them pass.
She's safe. For now.
They were given a corner in a crowded dormitory. Thomas sat against the wall all night, listening to Kiara breathe. By dawn, he was under a broken rover, hands black with grease. The settlement needed mechanics.
Tom as.
She found him there, holding out a wrench. Her gray hand was steady, her eyes bright with pride. In the dusty yard, Kiara chased a ball with human and Koran orphans. Her laugh was a new sound. Evening meals were communal. She sat in his lap, eating stew, her one-eyed doll propped beside her. At night, curled against his side, she slept without shivering. He watched her and let the quiet in, though war still rumbled beyond the walls. Years passed like water. Thomas's hair turned gray, his hands slower, but the girl grew tall and sharp. Her Koran and English seamless. She watched war reports on a flickering monitor, searching for the why of her abandonment. The Koran doctrine was there, cold on the screen.
Why did they leave me? Tell me the truth.
The Koran called it strategic sacrifice. The slow, wounded children were abandoned to speed the retreat.
They decided I was worthless.
Not to me.
She turned away, shoulders tight. Thomas stopped his hand before reaching her, letting her process the weight.
I was trash to them.
Later, she returned and buried her face in his shoulder. He held her without words, and the war outside felt distant. When she finally looked at him, her eyes carried a new fire. Not the hurt of a child, but the resolve of someone who had been given a reason. One morning, Kiara burst into the shack, a datapad glowing in her hand. She didn't ask permission, just held it out.
It's a peace network. Koran and human survivors talking. They need people who understand both. They need me.
Number, not you. You are too young. You don't know what you are asking for.
I am not a child anymore. I speak both languages. I survived being left behind. No one else can stand where I stand.
I didn't carry you out of that rubble to lose you now.
You carried me out so I could have a life. Let me use it.
She has her mother's fire. If you are set on this, you'll learn it properly. I'll teach you everything I know about the war, the tactics, the politics, the waste. No illusions.
She nodded, and for a moment, the steel in her expression broke into something small and grateful. He had promised to protect her from the world. Now, he would have to teach her how to change it. A cough that had lingered for weeks turned savage. Thomas couldn't rise from his cot. His strength gutted by fever, Kiara brought broth and scavenged medicine, her gray hands steady where his once were. The role had reversed completely. She pressed a damp cloth to his forehead, and in the dim light he watched her, no longer the child in rubble, but his protector. One gray morning, she packed a small satchel. Thomas propped himself up, his voice a thin rasp.
You don't have to go.
Yes, I do. For both of us.
She placed a folded paper in his palm, then closed his fingers over it. The paper held a child's drawing, a stick figure soldier and a small alien. A crayon sun above them. From the window, he watched her walk through the gate, turn once, and then head toward the waiting transport. The drawing trembled in his hand. She was gone into a war he could no longer fight, but in that crumpled paper, she had left him a reason to live. The capital was a fortress of suspicion. Her Corin face drew glares, her human words, hostility. She spoke both in one breath, and they let her pass.
I am not here to beg. I offer a bridge built from the rubble.
That bridge earned her a place in the diplomatic corps, where grief became prose and anger, strategy, a smuggled note. She was accepted. They call her a prodigy. She said, "Tell him I am still his daughter." He pinned each message beneath the drawing. The girl who called him Da was remaking the world. Then a broadcast, a peace conference. Kiara was the voice rising from the rubble.
When I was left to die, a human soldier lifted me without asking permission. That single act did more than any treaty ever could.
She's real. She's mine.
He listened, knuckles white. Every word proof that an abandoned child could shake the world. After, he touched the drawing. For the first time, he believed the war might end. A formal envelope arrived at the settlement, sealed with both human and Corin insignia. Inside, her handwriting. The final treaty will be signed. Be there. I need you to see what you started.
She called me home.
He traveled through landscapes, scarred and healing. An old soldier with a cane and a child's drawing folded in his pocket. At the capital, he stepped out and looked up at the great hall, columns rising like hope from the wreckage. Inside, marble and light. Across the vast hall, a gray-skinned woman in diplomatic robes turned and their eyes met.
You came.
Neither spoke another word. She closed the distance, and he folded into her embrace, the cane clattering softly. When they pulled apart, the empty ceremonial stage waited at the hall's end, chairs arrayed for a peace the world hadn't yet made. She took his hand. The girl left in the rubble, and the man who carried her out, now stood at the threshold of ending the war they'd both survived. The hall fell silent as Kiara climbed the podium. A lifetime of war stared up at her. Generals, elders, the children of the rubble.
I was 4 years old when my own people left me to die. The Corin doctrine called it strategic sacrifice. A human soldier, against orders, against logic, pulled me from the rubble. He didn't ask permission. He didn't weigh politics. He taught me that a child's life is never a strategic question. He gave me his food, his warmth, his name. I speak for both species because he raised me in both worlds. Everything I am began with one act of uncalculated compassion.
She paused. Her gaze found the old man in the front row, and in the silence he gave the smallest nod.
The only word I have for him, in any language, is Dad.
For one held breath, the hall was stone. Then, a sound rose, not applause, but a wave of recognition. Thomas bowed his head, tears cutting through his old smile. In that word, the war had found its truce. Kiara stepped down, and the girl once left in rubble took her father's hand again. The treaty, not yet signed but already written. Thomas rose on unsteady legs. Kiara met him before the podium and took his hand again, drawing him into an embrace before the world. The Corin delegate spoke. We were wrong. To abandon a child is our deepest shame. With a trembling hand, the Corin leader signed the treaty. Then the human general added her name. Cameras flashed, recording the ink that ended the war.
It's done, Dad.
She ended the war. Her own people started the day they left her behind.
The war that began with a child in rubble ended with her standing over the treaty, her father beside her. Thomas looked at the child who once called him Tom Az and let tears fall without shame. The hall erupted, but over it all, he heard her quiet breath, just like long ago in the rubble. She held his hand tightly, and together they walked toward the light of the new world. They walked through a walled garden behind the hall. Autumn leaves drifted down, and the distant celebration murmur faded to a hush.
Did you ever regret it? Just once?
He stopped and met her eyes, the decades rising in his gaze like light through old glass.
Not once, little one. Not one single second.
She searched his face and found no hesitation. The words settled into her like a stone finally laid down. Then her expression broke open, the same tiny fragile smile she had given him long ago in the rubble, when he handed her a doll.
I knew you would say that.
He reached up, his hand trembling, and brushed a fallen petal from her shoulder. The gesture held all the years. They walked on, the old soldier and his daughter, as the golden leaves fell around them and the world at last was quiet. In that garden, the war became a memory. What remained was simply love. The crayon drawing, stick soldier and alien child, was framed beneath museum lights, a relic of the war that ended. In the settlement memorial, a battered helmet rested on a simple chair, the name Keen etched below. Around Kiara's neck, the old dog tags still hung, her name engraved beside his. In a sunlit schoolyard, a gray-skinned child threw a ball to a human friend. No one called them enemy. The Corin cenotaph, built in shame, bore a single line: "To those we failed," on a bench at dawn. Thomas and Kiara watched the rebuilt city awake, his hand resting over hers. But the image the world carried was older, a soldier carrying a child through rubble, without a word. It was cast in bronze in the Peace Square, a silhouette against every sunrise. The difference between two civilizations was never about starships. It was about what you do when you find a child in the rubble. And it all began when a human soldier, without a word, simply picked her up and carried her home. At the very end, he was an old man with deep lines and soft eyes, lying in a sunlit room. Kiara sat beside him, holding his hand as he had once held hers.
You were the best thing I ever did, little one.
I know, Da.
His breath slowed, then quieted. The hand in hers went still. She didn't cry out. She pressed her forehead to his palm and let the decades pour through her like light. The statue still stood in the Peace Square, a soldier carrying a child into the dawn, cast in bronze against every sunrise. A young girl stopped before it with her mother. "Who is that man, Mama?" A gray-haired Corin woman nearby heard the question. She touched the dog tags at her throat and smiled, but she did not answer. She didn't need to. The child looked up at the bronze faces and then at the sky. And for a moment, the world was exactly as it should be, because a human soldier, one day, without a word, had simply picked her up and carried her home.